Hey everybody, welcome. I wanted to come in and add some value. And basically what I want to share with you guys this evening is I've had a little breakthrough recently with some clients that I've been working with, but also it's interesting because the breakthroughs I have that then are impacting clients and the things that I'm learning work incredibly well for them. There's always some sort of interesting parallel with my own life. And I've found a realization in improving my own mental health to a higher level, which I didn't really think it could have gotten higher, but it really has. And I think it's because I came about a new realization about an old concept. So in other words, there's something that I've taught over the years, but I never really understood it in the way that I've just now recently understood it. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you guys is a very, very simple 3-part framework. And what I think this will give you is it will give you a much higher level of mastery over just your own thoughts and your own feelings, but doing it in a way that feels very elegant as opposed to feeling very forced. And so I would say that this particular training is for somebody who has struggled with whether or not they should accept their anxiety and just kind of, let it exist. So there's that philosophy out there. And then there's the other philosophy of, you need to resist and push it down and repress it and push it away. So if you've ever felt like you haven't fully mastered that balance of where do I just kind of have self-compassion for myself and accept what I'm feeling, and then where is it that I decide to draw a boundary and make sure that I'm, directing my mind in the appropriate way. If you've had difficulties with kind of sinking into a negative state again and again and again, then this will be very relevant for you. And so basically what I've learned is that there's kind of 3 main ways that you can process your emotions and your feelings when they're coming up. What I find is that typically when people come into my world and they're looking for help, they usually are doing one of 2 different ways of processing their emotions. And they basically lie on 2 opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of how you approach it. So the first way that a lot of people have been conditioned to process their emotions is through repression, right? Now, repression, this means that we give a meaning to the feeling that is popping up. And the meaning that we give it is, this is not allowed. I shouldn't be feeling this. And it can even get more insidious from there, like I'm a bad person because I'm feeling this. And the problem that occurs with the repression is that we basically create what I call a pebble in your shoe, right? It leaves the issue unexamined, unresolved. It creates this sort of stacking sensation because as soon as you condition yourself to avoid processing that emotion and just kind of ignoring that it's even there, now all of a sudden you've reinforced yourself for doing that exact same thing. And so then you'll end up with multiple pebbles in your shoe. And this is how anxiety can raise over the course of 2 to 3 months or, whatever period of time. So we've got to make sure that you're learning how to process this properly. I've witnessed this with a handful of clients, and this also happened for me in my childhood. I had a pattern with my anxiety of actually getting hysterical. Some people would call it a panic attack or whatever, but I would be like heaving, like I couldn't breathe, and I would be crying, and it was just this, I was in hysterics. And that was a pattern that went on from, age 7 to age 9, probably, every so often. What it really came from was me falling into what we call the tough kid archetype. So there's basically 7 types of anxiety: the perfectionist, the pleaser, the caretaker, the controller, the achiever, tough kid, and the comedian. And so all of those are different belief structures where people can learn at a very young age, like this is how you have to be. So I grew up in an environment that is not very dissimilar from a lot of you guys, where feeling, just being able to feel sad or cry or, whatever, was not really allowed. It was not really rewarded, right? So I kind of grew up around that whole idea of like, boys don't cry kind of thing. And so what ends up happening is as you go through your life, you create sometimes a key belief that says, okay, I can't let this feeling exist. And what I have been learning in my adult life is that by me not allowing feelings to exist to some degree, that created a deeper pattern of me not allowing myself to have vulnerability and connection with people at the level that I wanted to, because as you kind of stamp out the bad, you kind of stamp out the good at the same time, because you're basically telling yourself, well, I'm not allowed to feel. And so what your nervous system therefore concludes is, okay, well, we're just going to feel much less of everything, like the good and the bad. Anyway, for some of you, you may have grown up and created that tough kid archetype also. You may have created a belief system that basically says, I can't feel this way. I can't, act this way. I have to be strong. I have to be resilient. And that tends to create the pattern of repression. I get it. You don't want to be seen as vulnerable. You do want to be seen as put together. And I had a woman a couple days ago who was basically saying to me, yeah, I really want to be the go-to person. I want to be the person that's got all the answers. I want to be the person that everyone comes to. So I fully relate to that. For most of my life, I was in that same sort of belief system, and many of you guys are in that too. That leads to repression. But the key thing here, and it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, right? Like the issue just compounds over time. If we create this pattern of repression, that obviously is not going to work. So, okay, well, what do we do instead? Well, what most people who don't do the repression thing do is they go on the other side of the spectrum into what I call indulgence. Okay, now indulgence is a very particular way to process your thoughts and feelings, and it is very unhealthy, but it's unhealthy for a different reason than repression. With repression, the unhealthy thing is there is something that is occurring, there is something that exists, there is a thought, there is a feeling that's coming up. And I'll stay away from thoughts for a second because really we're talking about feelings here. Thoughts, you have far more control over which ones you entertain and which ones you allow and which ones you don't allow. And we'll talk about the relationship between thoughts and feelings here shortly. But what I'm more so talking about when the feeling is occurring in your body, whether or not you allow yourself to feel it or whether you punish yourself for feeling it. Now, when we talk about indulgence, right, what does indulgence mean? Typically, there's a lot of people out there who kind of have this attitude of like, well, these are my feelings, and if you don't appreciate my feelings, then screw off. Like, my feelings are my feelings, and I don't need to change my feelings. Right? Like there is that sort of like proud attitude out there, this kind of sense of entitlement of like, I'm entitled to feel pissed off and sad as much as I possibly want. And if anyone tries to challenge me to think differently, then you're the problem, right? It's not too hard to figure out when we're indulging in it. Indulgence is when the natural arc of the emotion rising and falling has already occurred, but then we have allowed it to become a cycle. We've allowed it to become a pattern. So now that same emotional cycle is repeating itself. So, for example, my general rule of thumb, by the way, is the way to get the quality of life that you want is to do the right things the majority of the time. So, is it reasonable for us to expect that you go through your entire life never getting triggered, never coming up with a little narrative in your head that might drive you crazy for an hour or two, never feeling reactive to another human being, never feeling vulnerable or sad? Is that really reasonable? No. Not at all, especially if you're going to follow the other strain of advice that we always give people, which is you need to be living a life of growth. You need to be challenging yourself to some degree. You need to feel like you're growing in your relationships, in your career, in your physical body. And so if you're growing, what that means is you're constantly facing new fears and then moving through those fears. And when you encounter those fears, it's very natural for your nervous system to react in kind of a funny way. And if we just go, oh, my nervous system's reacting in a funny way, I don't like that way that I'm feeling, I'm just going to repress it and ignore it, then you never reach the next level because you're not processing the emotional response that's occurring to your new environment. And so if you don't process it and move through it and use it to grow, then what's going to happen? Your nervous system therefore goes, ooh, every time we grow to this level, every time we get past this part of the comfort zone, feels pretty icky, and I don't like that icky feeling, and I'm not allowed to feel that icky feeling, so we're just going to retreat back into our old life. And that's how anxiety can cause people to shrink their life. They start taking less risks in their career, in their relationships. They start playing small. And that's how it happens over the course of weeks, months, or years, or decades. And so when we talk about indulgence, what I want to really make sure that I'm getting through to you here with indulgence is, first of all, the quality of indulgence is it's repetitive. However, it's not your fault if you are really sincerely trying to break the pattern, but you feel like you just don't have the skills yet, right? So I'm not faulting you if your intention is, I really want to break out of the pattern and I don't want to indulge in it. I hear you. I get you. What I'm saying, however, though, is that there is a subconscious layer, typically, not in every situation, but typically there's a subconscious layer where we're not even intending to do it, but we are indulging in a thought or emotional cycle. And we're doing it, again, subconsciously, almost always, because it meets some of our 6 needs. Okay, so many of you guys who've been in my world for a while, you've heard about the 6 needs. If you haven't, this is a very important thing you need to understand if you want to live without anxiety. The 6 needs determine what we do. The 6 needs are the drivers of all human behavior. The first one is the desire for certainty / comfort, right? So sometimes what people do without realizing it is they stay in a negative headspace because it's comfortable. It's not pleasant. It's not what they want necessarily, but it is what is familiar. And one thing my career has taught me is that the nervous system has a high propensity towards doing what is familiar. And so this is why, for example, people stay in an unhealthy relationship for way too long, because ironically, the fear of what happens when I stay is lesser than the fear of what could happen if I leave. And same reason why people stay in a job that they hate for way too long. Same reason why people overeat when they're mentally, they tell themselves they want to lose weight. It's just because there's a greater level of certainty, right? Our nervous system loves a pattern. Our nervous system loves to like get on autopilot. And so if you're not careful, negative emotions can become a way for us to just enter into that mode of the brain basically saying, well, I know what to expect. As long as I'm pissed off and angry, I know what to expect. I don't really know how to do this lovey-dovey forgiveness shit. So I'm just going to stay pissed off because at least I know how to get pissed off. Or, well, I don't really know very confidently how to step things up and improve my career and turn my life around, but I do know how to stay sad. I definitely know how to get sad. So I'm just going to do that. And I know that sounds weird. And again, I'm not saying it's happening at a conscious level, but subconsciously, your nervous system is going to want to pull you into the lowest common denominator emotion that you have currently trained yourself for. So there's this like phrase, and I think it's from the Army, maybe the Marines, which is the last place I typically would reference. But the quote, I think, is like, every soldier sinks to the level of their conditioning. My take on that is you'll never get the mental health that you want necessarily, but you will definitely get the mental health that you tolerate. So if you condition your brain to stay in a sad, pissed off, anxious state, that's what you're going to get. If we raise the bar and we say, no, I'm not going to indulge in this pattern anymore. I'm going to break that pattern, and I'm going to make sure that my new emotion that I'm using to get all of my needs met is something that's actually resourceful and helps me out, then that helps you much more. So we'll talk more about how to do that in a second. But anyway, the whole point I'm trying to get you to understand is part of why we indulge in negative feelings and thought patterns is because it gives us certainty. It's just what we know what to expect. The second need is the need for variety. So when we go from calm to anxious, or we go from angry to sad or whatever, when we swing back and forth inside of these negative emotions, strangely, that meets our nervous system's need for variety. The human nervous system craves variety, and it's not too hard to figure that out. I think about everything you do as a human being, right? Like you want some amount of variety in your entertainment, in your food, in your conversation, in your friends. Now, you want just enough variety, right? This is the interesting thing about human beings. We love certainty. Like we love having that one best friend that we can just call on a Friday and be like, hey, you want to go hang out? Why? Because our brain loves the certainty of knowing that, yeah, we're going to have a decent time if we hang out tonight. But you don't want to talk about the exact same things every single time, every single moment. You don't want every conversation to be the same. You want some amount of variety. When we go into these negative emotional states, you're firing off different biochemicals in your nervous system. And just take, for example, like you've probably had a moment in your life where you were really, really angry, and you were angry for probably like 15 minutes. And then after you were enraged for 15 minutes, then what probably happened is your nervous system went and you went into like sadness mode. And then you got sad for 20 minutes and then you got angry again. And this is what we call the crazy eight. The crazy eight happens when our nervous system is indulging in a negative state to meet our needs. So that's one of the reasons why that happens. The third need that we have is the need to feel significant. And ironically, having problems, like sinking into negative feelings, becomes a way to feel significant, because powerlessness is the greatest power, right? If we are able to maintain a narrative of, oh no, you don't understand, like it really is so bad and I don't have these options, and it's, you know, if we go into that story, if we indulge in that story, it can help us basically soothe our ego and make us believe that it's not our fault, it's all these other things outside of us. Right? So it's not our responsibility to make a change. Well, and that's fundamentally the problem that occurs there, because as soon as we let ourselves off the hook for guilting ourselves then we believe that the power exists external to us and that we don't really have the power to make the change. So the trick is to make sure that you're not putting guilt on yourself while also making sure that you maintain a state of responsibility, right? Where you say, okay, well, it's not my fault that I got into the situation I am in currently. I just didn't know any better up until now. And I'm not going to, even if I did know better, I'm not going to waste any time guilting myself because that's not going to do anything good for me. I am, however, going to take responsibility and start making changes now, right? That is the level of honesty that you got to be willing to have with yourself, which we'll talk about more in the third section. So anyway, certainty, variety, significance. Indulging in negative feelings also meets our fourth need for connection, ironically. Very often having big problems becomes the primary vehicle through which people communicate with each other. So they don't even know. I've witnessed it occur in friend groups and things, and that's why you got to remove yourself from those environments. But some people don't know how to have a conversation unless they're having a conversation about their problems. It's a very real thing. So what's strange is the brain works like this, right? It doesn't exactly make sense, but it does make sense. The brain works where it goes, man, last time I was really sad and I called my friend and I told my friend how sad I was, we had this connection. Even if it was a low feeling, like the human nervous system would rather be connected than disconnected. We'd rather be disconnected and sad than disconnected in many cases. So this becomes another layer of how addictive these negative feelings can be. The fifth need is the need for growth. The sixth need is the need for contribution. And ironically, indulging in negativity even can meet those needs. I've witnessed people, like I'll have sometimes people who come to me and they'll say, Ty, you don't understand. I could probably coach people. I've had anxiety for 10 years. I've Googled everything. I've read every book. I've done this, I've done that. I give people advice a lot of the times. I hear some of you guys being like that, being in that mode. And what that mode is, strangely, your mind has associated having anxiety as a way to grow and to contribute and to connect and to do all these things. And so that's how you end up with an addiction. That's how you end up with something in your nervous system that you feel like you can't shake. That's how you end up with something that feels inseparable from your identity, even though it is separable from your identity. But your identity won't shift because you're scared shitless about giving up this thing that even though it's painful to you, you know it and you understand it and you know what to predict and you know how it's going to go. And even though it's shitty, you think it's like what you deserve. You think it's just who you are. That's indulgence, right? We're overly attaching to this negative thing. We're using it to meet our needs. We're hiding in it. And the next distinction I want to give to you guys, when I say hiding in it, is I want to distinguish between what we call a safe problem and a quality problem. Okay, and this was something that one of my mentors, Chloe Madonis, taught me. And very fascinating thing. So basically, think of human beings as having two types of problems. A quality problem is basically like the type of problem that you experience when you're growing up, for example. Struggling to learn how to drive a car. That's a quality problem, right? That is a problem for a teenager. You don't know how to drive a car. Okay, that's a problem. But it's a quality problem. A quality problem is in, okay, we're going to work on this. We're going to grow from this. We're going to experience something new. And we're going to become more powerful in terms of how we operate in the world, right? It's a quality problem. Another quality problem would be, when you're 14 or whatever age you are, and you have your first experience of heartbreak, whatever that means for you. That's a quality problem. Is that a problem? Yes, but it is a problem that is both natural for that particular stage of your emotional development, and it's a quality problem as in you're gonna grow from it. If we go to adulthood, quality problems are things like, I really hate my job, I want to change my career, but I don't have the skill set mastered that I would need in order to succeed in this career change. That is a quality problem, right? That means you have an opportunity now to improve your skill set and make that thing occur. But what's interesting is we will look at a problem like that, we'll get scared, and then what we do is we then recite a narrative and a pattern about a safe problem. So I see this with people all the time, every week of my career. So like somebody will get on the phone and I'll ask them, hey, what are you looking for help with the most right now? And they'll start telling me a story about what they think their problem is. And then come to find out there's some like cataclysmically larger issue that they didn't even bring up, like the fact that they and their partner have been contemplating divorce, or the fact that they've accumulated a lot of debt, or the fact that one of their family members has got a major alcohol addiction, or whatever, some sort of major thing. And I'm like, how have we not talked about that, right? And what it is someone will get on the phone and they'll be like, yeah, I just really want help with my diet. I think I need to do this and I need to do that. And then what I'll find what the actual like real fly in the ointment is. And then it will become plain as day that this person has created a blind spot for themselves. They've created a scotoma, right? They basically have pigeonholed themselves down their safe problem and as a way to ignore dealing with the quality problem. This happens all the time. And I've done this, by the way. I've done this many times in my life, but much, much, much less so now that I've become aware of it. And the metaphor that we like to use for this is it's like you're straightening the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. And now the Titanic is, that's an extreme metaphor. Not everybody is like, oh my gosh, I'm about to be bankrupt or something, right? Like the vast majority of you guys are nowhere near that. Most of you guys are very successful people. But my point is, like, let's put it this way. The biggest upgrade you could have in your quality of life is waiting in the work that you are either too afraid or too lazy to do right now. And I say that to you, and I also say it to myself. Like, it's one of those things that's true for all of us, basically at all times, because the mind is in this constant state of wanting to assess and then ignore and avoid if we allow it to. And the trick is to train your brain to not avoid the things that really have to be double clicked on to improve your quality of life. Yeah, you want to be aware if you have a safe problem over a quality problem, because that's got to change, okay? And so being, say, like depression or anxiety or panic attacks or any of these things, what that ends up doing is it ends up becoming a safe problem. Or if we start going on and on about how, 30 years ago, your brother stole money from you and then never talked to you again, and so now you've never had like good relationships friendship-wise with other men, like telling ourselves that same old story, telling ourselves that same old narrative, it becomes a safe problem. It becomes a problem, but it's a safe problem. You can't really do anything about it. It doesn't really matter anymore. But we just keep toiling with it. We just keep messing around with it. It's like having a cut on the roof of your mouth that you just keep picking at again and again and again. And the damn thing would heal just fine if you stopped picking at it, right? But we pick at it because it gives us an excuse to avoid the real thing that matters, right? We can use emotions like this as indulgences. And the other metaphor I think of is like wrapping yourself up in a blanket. Like some people wrap themselves up in anxiety, wrap themselves up in depression, wrap themselves up in it. There is this like layer to it. I'm not saying people are just going, okay, I'm going to be anxious now. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the anxiety occurs, the anxiety wells up, the depression wells up, whatever. And there is a layer. We know that we could make a change. We could decide we're not going to give this as much energy, but then we decide we're gonna give it more of our energy. And after a while, we train ourselves to just let the floodgates open and all the energy is given to it. We want to be careful with that. And the one point I made earlier I want to reinforce is that powerlessness is the ultimate power. So if I have this big giant story that I keep telling myself for 10 years about how I was wronged or how something was done to me, that story may be even totally factually true, which, by the way, they're not. The science has shown that 90% of your memories are not true after 12 months. So our memories are highly unreliable. But the point I'm making here is that even if the story is totally true, continuing to tell yourself that story is a way that you're allowing yourself to justify not putting your focus on the other things that would really improve your quality of life. And so that's a key change that needs to happen. So what do we do, right? If we don't want to indulge and let our emotional states be a way for us to meet our needs and literally train our nervous system to get addicted to being in a negative state, we don't want to do that. We also don't want to repress, right? We don't want to go, okay, well, I'm feeling something and nope, I'm not feeling anything. We don't want to do those two things. So what do? Well, I have taught this for a couple years and it's the same thing, but I will say that in my own personal life, I myself just had a breakthrough recently where I realized I was repressing some things. And then I've changed this to a little bit of a different word. So the third option, the way I've usually described it, is expression. So you don't want to repress. You don't want to indulge. What do you want to do? You want to express the feeling. Let the feeling occur. Think of the feeling being like a wave, right? The wave kind of rises. It peaks for a minute and then it crashes and falls, and then it goes away, right? And so you have this model of allowing the feeling to exist, going, oh, hey, the feeling exists, then redirecting it and saying, okay, well, yeah, thank you, feeling. I appreciate that. Now we're redirecting the energy somewhere else. Instead of the word expression, I'm changing this now to be radical acceptance. And I'm borrowing this from a friend of mine who really kind of triggered this realization in me that I was not having like the same level of radical acceptance with myself that I really could. And that there was a set of emotions and feelings that I was not allowing myself to be able to feel. And I had a belief system that basically said that if I allow that negative feeling to be acknowledged or to be felt, that I'm gonna lose control. Like that was kind of the energy that I was coming from. Is, oh my gosh, if I'm feeling something negative and I allow it to exist, I'm gonna sink right in. I'm gonna like go right into the bottom of the black hole. Anyway, she kind of helped me realize this, and I have started embracing this idea of radical acceptance much more. And I think of, and this is maybe a little bit more, maybe a different metaphor would be good for the ladies. This is like a slightly masculine sort of metaphor perhaps, but you know, like I think of like martial arts, right? Like in martial arts, there's this whole philosophy of not resisting, not forcing, not pushing, but rather redirecting. Right? Like Bruce Lee says, you know, be like water. So it's this idea of like, okay, we're taking whatever energy is coming to us, we're using it for our advantage, and we're directing it over here. We're not going to try to clash with it. We're not going to try to like meet that negative energy with more negative energy of resistance. We're going to accept it. We're going to allow it to exist, and then learn from it ideally, and then redirect it and use it for growth. So I also think of this quote from Marcus Aurelius. He said, take whatever comes to you as woven in the fabric of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs? And I had heard that quote for years, but I never thought about applying that idea to your emotions. And thinking now of just like your emotions as being like raw energy that's coming up, that's here to teach you something and that you can use to redirect, is really, really the way that you want to go, especially when things are bringing a response in you for the first time, right? Now, if you've got a pattern that's been developed for years and years and years and years, like accepting the fact that, okay, this pattern is here, I need to work on this pattern, I need to get some tools, right? Like that's the mentality that you would approach a pattern with. If it was an isolated moment where you weren't expecting to get triggered by it, but then all of a sudden some new environment or something that was said triggers something in you that you don't even fully understand. In a moment like that, you'd want to go, okay, my nervous system is feeling something right now, right? And by the way, to create something that helps with this is remembering that you are not the same thing as your mind. The mind is going to have automatic negative reactions to things from time to time. That's okay, right? That is not a reflection on you as a soul, as a person, as a human. The fact that your mind is thinking a thought, or the fact that your nervous system is feeling a feeling, is not a reflection on your self-worth as a human being. Right? So we have to separate between the pattern and the person. And if we start just looking at the pattern, we can have a level of radical acceptance that then leads to honesty, that then leads to resolution. So here's kind of how it would go. Without giving all of the really, really nitty-gritty personal details, I'll share kind of the example from my own life here. But basically what happened was there was someone in my life that I cared a lot about, and something was said by them that threw me into a bit of a spiral. When I noticed my mind was going in that direction, I was starting to feel hurt. I was starting to feel reactive. I was starting to feel defensive. And as I noticed those sensations occurring in me, my initial response was ignore, shut down, don't talk about it, right? And basically, this person I care about kind of called me out on it and was like, hey, like there's something going on in you. I can tell. We need to talk about it. And my response was, no, I don't want to talk about it. And basically she said like, no, we have to, right? And so it was this big realization of like, I was about to put a big giant pebble in my shoe by saying, no, I'm feeling something, but I just don't want to process this. I just want to ignore it, basically. And what she said is, no, like we need to talk about it. So what I had to do is I had to like totally be vulnerable, and just be like, it's not a state, it's the total opposite of what I grew up with as a kid. Like the lesson I got taught as a kid is, don't cry, don't be weak, don't be whatever. Like it was the classic all of that pejorative stuff. And so now to be able to be like, okay, well, sheesh, I'm feeling something and I don't even understand what I'm feeling, but I'm feeling it. That territory for me historically has not been territory I've even considered existed. I've tended to want to, compartmentalize and understand things. But anyway, the punchline is that I had to say, okay, I accept the fact that this feeling exists. And as soon as I accepted the fact that the feeling exists, and I decided I was not going to withhold love from myself just because the feeling existed. So in other words, my self-worth was not determined by the fact that I was feeling the feeling. And I was like, okay, well, Ty, you're still a good guy. It's all good. You're just feeling a feeling. I just talked to myself like that. And as I did that, it was like this huge release. It was literally like that wave was able to move through me again. So it's almost like the wave started to come up. And then I said, no. But then it stays right here, right? So it's still bubbling under the surface. But if you allow it to rise up and then fall, then it, goes away. Yeah, the term radical acceptance is the one that comes to mind. And there's a quote or an example here that I want to share too. I was watching a show about dog training, especially training animals who had come from really abusive environments. The owners or whatever were all scared and reactive to the dog. And the trainer basically said, that dog is not a bad dog. That dog is responding exactly how that dog is supposed to based on all of their previous experiences. And I thought about that for a second, and it made me realize, yeah, that's exactly why human beings do what they do. That's exactly why mental patterns exist. It's because, the reason why somebody's having the reaction that they're having is because their nervous system has gotten trained through all of the different experiences in their events that this is how you react in that type of situation. And it may not be a healthy response. It may not be the correct response necessarily. But if we start from a level of compassion for ourselves, just in the same way that we would need to have a level of compassion for the animal if we're going to train the animal, if we start from that sense of okay, my patterns are my patterns. Where I'm at in my life right now is where I'm at. I have had a tendency to be a little negative. I've had a tendency to be a little lazy recently. I've had a tendency to be a little neurotic and just spending time on things I shouldn't be spending time on. It's amazing that once you start practicing the skill of just being radically accepting, being loving and honest with yourself, how much faster you're able to let these feelings rise and then fall and then get out of your system. So it does not become repetitive. It does not become chronic. It does not become a big issue. And I do believe that those patterns are popping up because basically there's a hidden lesson in there that you have not yet uncovered, right? A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, he has this phrase he uses a lot where he'll say things like, this was being my mentor in that moment. So for example, he'll tell me, he's like, my wife was my mentor in that moment. And what he's basically saying is he'll have things that trigger him. He'll have things that cause this negative response, this initial knee-jerk response. Just like, the dog would have a response to a certain trigger. But then what he does is he goes, okay, hold on a second. This is my mentor showing up in my life right now. What am I meant to learn from this? What are the hidden gifts in this? And he gets curious and he gets appreciative even. He actually is grateful that the negative response has occurred because he knows I'm about to grow right now. I'm about to learn something new. I'm about to expand. And so I love that. And, I've met different people who have different ways of doing it. For me, the way I sort of do it with myself is I call it zooming out. So what I notice sometimes is my mind will be too zoomed in on something. So it'll be getting worried or just giving too much energy to something that's going on a daily level. And then I'll have to zoom out and go, okay, well, maybe I'm not showing up in this area in the way I want to, or maybe I'm putting a little bit of energy in this that I really don't want to be putting into. So it's just a way of, there's a term out there, metacognition, which is thinking about how you think. It's creating one layer of removal and then having the honesty to go, okay, this is what's actually going on. But then also coupling that with the big state of love and self-compassion, basically, where you're able to operate and say, I am still not going to withhold love from myself because this feeling exists right now. And I'm just going to be honest about probably why this feeling is here in the first place. It's a really cool way to go about doing things in that regard. A couple other tidbits I'm going to give you. This is one of my favorite questions to use for processing things. What would I have to believe in order to feel this way? And what I believe is that beliefs drive emotions. So if I'm feeling a particular way, it's because my nervous system has given a meaning to something. It has applied a belief structure to something. And the belief structure is what is actually causing me to feel what I'm feeling. So if I ask myself, well, what would I have to believe in order to have this reaction and feel the way I'm feeling it? Then I'll be able to figure out what that belief is. And then I can ask myself very simply, okay, well, is that really true? And that creates a way for processing and releasing. The other thing that you can do as well, I use this one from time to time, is when I notice that I need to set a boundary with myself. And by the way, people vastly misunderstand what a boundary is, how to do it, how to set it, and they're afraid of setting boundaries. Boundaries are what give all things shape and form and meaning. If there was no boundaries, you wouldn't have a roof over your head. If there were no boundaries, you wouldn't be able to, drink water out of a glass, because it would just spill all over the place. If there were no boundaries of where the electrical currents go in your devices, then you would have no ability to access the internet. If there were no boundaries of where cars do and don't go, there'd be no way to drive across town to go do what you want to do, right? All of life exists in energy flowing through boundaries. And so one way that we can take more control of our life is making sure that we're tapping into that flow of energy and redirecting it where we want to go. Another way we can decide how we're going to redirect that energy, if we want to change where the river is headed, we can change the river banks. And the way we change the river banks is we do what we call setting a new standard. And so there's some key phrases you can use with yourself that are really useful once you've been really, really honest with yourself. I had a moment a couple months ago where basically I was frustrated in a relationship in my life. And what I had to do is I had to realize, okay, some of these frustrations are occurring because of this over here that you keep telling yourself. However, a lot of these frustrations are occurring because you're not showing up. You're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. And so as soon as I was honest with myself, I now had a choice of beating myself up. That's not going to do me any good because now I'm just going to want to go watch TV and stay in bed, and that's not good. Or I could just be loving to myself. I could have radical acceptance and go, okay, that is the case. That is what has happened. That is what has got us to where we are right now. Now let's take responsibility and let's make it different. And when you start the process of taking responsibility to make it different, there's a couple phrases you can use to recite to yourself that become really powerful for deciding where those riverbanks go. And the key phrase that I like is I refuse. So for example, I refuse to believe that XYZ. I refuse to tell myself that XYZ. So I had a moment just this past week. Something was bothering me. Usually things don't bother me for more than 10 minutes, max. This was on my mind throughout the evening, and it was on my mind the next day. I thought to myself, all right, I'm just going to go to sleep. I'll feel better in the morning. Woke up the next morning. I was still bothered by this thing. And so what I realized is okay, we need to have a little self-honesty session here. So I kind of sat myself down, just had I kind of journaled, and I just had a little conversation with myself of okay, what's going on? What are we feeling right now? Let's just acknowledge the feeling. So I acknowledged the feeling, and then I was okay, what would I have to believe to be feeling that way? And so I was able to get the beliefs out of my head. And then I was able to go, okay, well, are those really true? Most of them were not true. And then the final step for me was asking myself, okay, well, what am I going to choose to believe? Because now that we've examined this, and now that we know that these old narratives that we've been telling ourselves are not true, now we need to draw some kind of a boundary with ourselves where we've already determined that old belief is not true. So the boundary now needs to be, I'm not going to keep telling myself this. How I'm going to choose to look at this is through this lens. So it's a refusal of, I'm going to put my energy there. It's a refusal of, I'm going to tell myself this. It's a refusal of, I'm going to keep this behavior going. Whatever the boundary is, it's just one way for you to create real resolution. And that's how your life gets better and better and better each and every time you get triggered. And that's how your triggers become a blessing. Because whenever you get triggered, you now know that you're going to have this real moment of radical self-acceptance, radical honesty, and then radical leadership where you decide, I'm going to make it different. And the final thing I'm going to leave you with, this has been a mantra for my life the past 90 days, and it is serving me incredibly well. And the mantra is just tell the truth. Tell the truth with yourself, first of all. Tell the truth with the people that you care about. And let me add in a little extra thing here. Telling the truth is not the same thing as just saying whatever is on your mind. There is a big fucking difference between those two things. If I go to someone I really care about and I just tell them everything that's on my mind, well, this and this and this and this and this and this, many of those things are not necessarily true. They're just random thoughts running through my mind. Now, if I were to go to that person I care about and I say, listen, I don't know what amount of these things are true, but I just want to be honest with you that these are the thoughts running through my mind. Okay, well, now that's a different story, right? But when I say tell the truth, it's like there was a moment I had recently where I was feeling this kind of feeling. I didn't want to let myself feel it. It was that whole scenario I told you about. It was bothering me all night, and then it was bothering me the next day. And I was like, okay, let's just acknowledge the feeling. And I was like, what am I feeling right now? And what I wrote down is, I'm a little scared. And I won't get into the details of what I was scared of, but just me saying, wow, I'm a little scared, and me going, yeah, I'm a little scared right now. It was so strange how just the acknowledgement of it and allowing it to exist for a second created this opportunity for me to then go, okay, that fear exists. It's right there. What am I going to do with it now? Because if I would just repress it, the fear continues to exist, but I'm not handling it. I'm not processing it. I'm not being like water, right? You know, and one little tip I will give you is if you're not in a loving state, it's not the truth. You're either in truthful, loving, and compassionate states of mind, or you are in fearful states of mind. And when you're in a fearful state of mind, your mind is going to be lying to you when you're in a state of fear. That's where this whole thing all comes together. That's what we mean by this radical self-acceptance. It's like, okay, whatever it is that's going on, I'm going to accept it, acknowledge it, speak it into existence. Here it is. And then now I'm going to take that, which is good. A lot of people even do that part, but I think you need the second part, which is, okay, well, now I'm going to take leadership and responsibility. Now, like, is this a narrative I've been telling myself for a really long time that I need to now decide I'm not going to indulge in telling myself anymore? Okay, great. We're not going to tell ourselves that narrative anymore. Have I not been showing up for my daughter or my son the way I really say that I'm supposed to and that I really want to? Okay, then tonight, I'm going to make sure I have a one-on-one quality time experience with both of them. That's what I'm going to do. So it's the honesty, the self-love, and the responsibility. You have to have all of those components. That's how I think you achieve what we refer to as mental and emotional mastery at a high level. Obviously, there's lots of skills and tools needed to make that happen. So that's it for today. We are giving away a pretty ridiculous free gift for any of you guys who want to take things to the next level. Basically, we're giving you 14 days of completely free access to every one of my classes. So my mental and emotional mastery class, which is all about how to deal with anxiety, depression, or other mental health challenges. My relationship mastery class, which is how to either create or rebuild an extraordinary romantic relationship, as well as heal any friendships, family relationships, or family ecosystems that are disruptive. That one's very, very powerful. Our financial anxiety elimination program, the coaching vault, which is a lot of some of my older trainings from years ago when my career was getting started. And then our personal freedom day planner, which is basically how I manage my time and how I keep myself organized running my businesses and so forth. Yeah, we're giving you access to all of those, as well as the recordings of last year's group calls. It's totally free, 14 days. You don't have to give us a payment method or anything like that. You just will have free access for 2 weeks. So that way you can just poke around, try everything out, see if you like it. So just comment trial on this video here if that's something you want access to, and we will go ahead and make sure that we get that over to you. But otherwise, I'll see you guys. Thanks for joining. See you soon. Bye.